In this tutorial, we are going to find out how to colour correct an image using Adobe Photoshop. We're going to take this image here, which shows the Harry Potter Quidditch team, and we're going to try and enhance the overall appearance of it. You notice that in this image, the robes are a little bit dull, and the overall cast of the image means that, apart from maybe from Malfoy, no one person particularly stands out. So we aim to make the whole picture look a little bit better, to make the Slytherin team have greener uniforms, and to make the red of the Gryffindor team a lot more vibrant. Before we do this, we're going to have a look at some Photoshop skills. So I'm going to start off with a new document, so File New, and I'm just going to pick whichever width I've got here. Doesn't really matter as long as we've got some sort of space to work with. Okay, what I'm going to have a look at is the gradient tool. Now you may find that you don't have a gradient tool. When you look down here, you see a paint bucket below the eraser and above this eye drop, this water droplet. If you hold in the paint bucket tool, we get the gradient tool. And what the gradient tool allows us to do is to blend between the two chosen colours. So I have black and white chosen here. If I drag from the bottom of the page to the top of the page straight up, I get a black through to white gradient. If I drag from one edge of the page across to the other, so I'm going from left to right, then I get black through to white across the way. If I drag down in the middle, so I'm not starting from an edge now, if I drag down from the middle, just a small drag, I'll get black to white, but the grey area is much smaller now. So it's a much quicker transition between the two colours. So how far you stretch the line is an indication of how quickly it goes from one colour to the other. And the direction you do that in is where it will start to end. So I'm going to start off here and I'm just going to go from black to white up the page. Okay. I'm now going to come down here and I'm going to add a second layer. So in my layers palette, I'm clicking on New Layer, and I have Layer 1 over the background. Layer 1 is empty at the moment. And I'm going to drag from right to left, like so. Now you can see that Layer 1 has completely covered up the background. If I use the Eye tool here, I can switch that on and off and see what effect it has. But the other thing I can do is choose how this layer blends with the one below. And if it's normal, it just covers it up. But if I was to choose something else, if I was to choose Darken, you'll see that there is a dark area each side and only a white line down the middle. I can cycle through the different options here using my arrow key. Multiply is taking dark with dark, and then only the light bit is remaining there, and that gives us a nice rounded edge. And if I step through other options, colour burn, linear burn, darker colour, and so on, you see we get different ways of blending these together. And that's going to be important when it comes to helping mask certain parts of our shape when it comes to then fixing different parts of it. We go back to multiply there. So I went black one side, black up the way, and I've got most of that out and only a white fading area here. Okay, so now on to the actual picture itself then. So I'm going to go to today's lesson, and you can see I have the Quidditch.jpg here. So if I click on that, it will load it up. I can right click and copy the image, come back to Photoshop, and then File, New, should pick up the same dimensions, the height and width of what I've just copied. I'm going to call it Quidditch. Click OK. Now what that will do is make an area that's wide enough and tall enough for that picture, but it won't put the picture in. To do that, I have to go to Edit and Paste. And now we have Layer 1 on top of the background, and we're ready to start enhancing. The first thing I'm going to do is just to turn this into a single layer. So I'm going to flatten the image. So this is from the layers drop-down menu here. Flatten image, and I've just got one layer to play with just now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is to make an adjustment to the scene. Now, if I used the edit options, or the image options, and made adjustments here, these are what are called destructive adjustments. When I make the change here, I can't undo it easily. So instead, I'm going to use this adjustments panel here. And what I'm going to do is to look at the brightness and contrast of this scene. So if I was to apply brightness and make it brighter, the whole scene becomes bright, or the whole scene becomes very dark, and that would obviously change what's happening here. What I want to do is to leave the arches in the background and maybe the foot area at the bottom fairly dark, and enhance this middle section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the rectangular selection tool. I'm going to drag just from about waist height and highlight the top half of the picture here. And I'm then going to use the gradient tool to go dark through to light. And if I look at the layers here, you will see that that has come up on the layer. Dark at the top, fading into grey. Now on the adjustment, I can then make that a little bit brighter and with a little bit less contrast. Maybe a bit more contrast actually. I'm then going to go to Select and Inverse so that I can now do the bottom half of the picture. And I'm going to do a gradient in the opposite direction. And so you can see that the difference it makes, if I show the layers again, if I switch off this layer, there's the original and there's my enhancement. And you can see it really brings out the faces of the Quidditch team compared to other elements of the background. So that's our first adjustment made in terms of what we're trying to achieve. We've enhanced the brightness and contrast of the entire scene. Next up, we're going to make Slytherin greener. So, what I want to do now is go to Select and Deselect. And now I'm going to use a special tool here. So you may have the Magic Wand tool available. We're going to go to the Quick Selection tool. And with the Quick Selection tool, you can change the size of what you're selecting here, incidentally. I'm going to keep it reasonably small, maybe about 20. And I can just go over parts of the team here. And what I want to do is to really just pick up all the parts of the uniform of the Slytherin team. I don't really particularly want anything else. So I'm going to try and carefully avoid picking up anything else. And you see it's spilled over into this area here. But that's easy enough to fix. I can now come to the minus brush here. Excuse me. And I can then just start to remove parts where it's spilled out. Now we can fix this later on, but it will be better if we don't take any parts we don't need. So I'm going to take his brush out of there, and the ground and his brush out of there. Take the ground out here, and this side bit of ground here. So really I've got mostly just uniform highlighted in there. A few extra tweaks, perhaps that little bit on there. Oh, need to go back to plus. And this little bit of robe that's hanging down here as well. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Adjustments, and I'm going to change, so I'm going to use this arrow to come back from my brightness contrast, and I'm going to make a colour adjustment to this. So I'm looking in here for, actually I'm going to use hue and saturation. So hue and saturation is about how strong the colours are. And you can see that what I can do is I can take the saturation, and as I push that up, you should see it's actually gone very blue there rather than green. And if I enhance the lightness too much, it will fade that out completely to white. So I need to be quite careful. But by pulling this colour towards the yellowy green side, I can then make them a bit greener. I can probably put in a little bit of lightness and take down the saturation a little bit. That's certainly a little bit greener than we had before. So I'm going to show the layers here. With the eye tool here, I can look at this masked area. The black isn't affected, the white is. And if I switch that on and off, there's the original drab grey robes. And there is something that is a bit greener and therefore more in line with what Slytherin should be wearing. Okay, so I'm going to do the same kind of thing again. I'm going to use my quick mask tool. I'm going to highlight all of the Gryffindor team, so with the red robes, trying to be careful not to pick up anything else. Don't really need to pick up any boots, just really red and yellow robes here. It's gone spilling over again. So back to the minus, and I'm going to take out any of these bits down here. I'm going to take out Harry's broom as well. Take out his feet, take out this broom. And that, maybe take this face out here as well, is a reasonable mask for the bits that I need. A few bits to add in here at the shoulders. So I'm trying not to have the faces in, just the actual uniforms. So I'm going to take Harry's face back out of that. That's probably good enough. Oh, I've still got Malfoy in here, so with his green robes. So let's take all of that out. So that's looking good enough. And then I'm going to go this time to my adjustments. I'm going to come back out of the hue saturation, and this time I'm going to apply a vibrance. So vibrance is about how bright the colours seem to be. So if I crank that up there, you can see it's gone very, very red, and down here it goes quite grey. So we want a lot of vibrance. And also saturation will say how strong the red of that is. So from no red at all the way through to very, very royal red. Probably that would be too much. I'm looking for something subtle about there. Maybe not quite as strong in the vibrance there. So something like that looks to me like a much better photograph than what we originally had. So I'm going to come back out of there, look at the layers again. If we go back to the original, I can switch off the vibrance, I can switch off the colour change hue saturation, and I can switch off the overall brightness. So there's an original, and there is our enhanced image. And this, we would go to File, Save As, and you're going to save that then into your folder. I've called mine Quidditch Brightness or Quidditch Brightened. You can do something similar. If you wanted to have a final image, you would go to File, Save for Web and Devices, and then you could export as a PNG or a JPEG or a GIF. And that's us done.